This morning, before I read the actual passage, I want to have you imagine the scene. It's less than a week before the Passover celebration begins in Jerusalem. People from far and near make the journey to Jerusalem every year to celebrate this holy day. For some, this is an annual gathering. For others, it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. There is excitement in the air. Maybe you can imagine yourself living there. Maybe you are an innkeeper. This is the time of year that you look forward to because it's the season that pays the bills throughout the rest of the year. People are filling the city streets and lodgings, and all of the lodging is at a premium. People are in a festive mood, so there are larger tips than usual too. You never make it to Jerusalem yourself, but you are sure happy to see the crowds on the way. On the other hand, you might be one of the pilgrims who come to Jericho every year for what has become a de facto family reunion. You haven't seen your cousins since last year, and this is the time to ooh and ah about how much the children look like your grandmother, or how much they have grown since last year. Passover is a family celebration as well as a religious festival, after all. Or perhaps you are a first-time participant in the celebrations. Maybe you have lived in lands far away and have finally saved enough money to join the crowds in celebrating this most important event in the life of your people. You have a heightened awareness of the story of your faith as you gather and sing the Psalms, the processional Psalms while walking through Jericho and heading up the hill to Jerusalem. I suspect there are also those who take advantage of the crowds who gather. Some might be selling the equivalent of modern-day t-shirts and key rings. Some would be offering special seats or maybe a tour package that would include meals and lodging in Jerusalem. Some might even offer to provide childcare or husbandry services while the pilgrims make their last leg of the trip on foot. Still others, I suspect, would sit by the road and ask for alms, preying on the generosity of the pilgrims. They have no intention of leaving Jericho, after all. The crowds will come back down the hill next week at the end of the festival. They are all in good spirits. There is extra money to be spent, and it's a religious holiday that encourages people to give. They couldn't ask for anything better. Added to the mix this year, however, is the traveling preacher who has brought his own crowd with him. He is making a reputation as a miracle worker, but most recently there is talk that he may be the Messiah, the son of David, who will ascend to the throne and free the land from Roman rule. No matter what part you are in this story, expectations are high. It's all Jesus can do to keep the expectations of his disciples in check. For several weeks now, maybe even several months, he's been trying to get them to see that he would be going to Jerusalem to die. But now they hear the expectations of the crowd and the rumors that are circulating, and they want to believe a different story. The story of a king being acclaimed and anointed. The story of a king who might rule from David's throne and fulfill the hopes of the people. The next day, in fact, Jesus will enter Jerusalem as throngs of people wave their palm branches. But in our text for today, all of these groups and expectations meet in the city of Jericho at the bottom of the hill that leads up to Jerusalem. So our scripture today is Mark 10:46 through 52. They came to Jericho. As he and his disciples and a large crowd were leaving Jericho, Bartimaeus, son of Timaeus, a blind beggar, was sitting by the roadside. When he heard that it was Jesus of Nazareth, he began to shout out and say, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." Many sternly ordered him to be quiet, but he cried out even more loudly, "Son of David, have mercy on me." Jesus stood still and said, "Call him here." And they called the blind man, saying to him, "Take heart, get up, he is calling you." Throwing off his cloak, he sprang up and came to Jesus. Then Jesus said to him, "What do you want me to do for you?" The blind man said to him, "My teacher, let me see again." Jesus said to him, "Go, your faith has made you well." Immediately he regained his sight and followed him on the way. We don't know anything more about Bartimaeus than what is written here. We know that Bartimaeus was named after his father, Timaeus. We know that he was blind. We know that he was begging for mercy, not necessarily for money. We know that because he asks for mercy and because he throws off his cloak, which would have been used to catch coins that people would have thrown his way. Unlike the man born blind in John's gospel, it seems Bartimaeus was not born blind, but rather acquired blindness at some point in his life. A common experience among the people was to contract a disease in which the eye duct would dry out, and in the arid climate, it often led to blindness, probably pink eye as we know it today. It was a dreaded disease spread by flies and touch, and my guess is that when he begins to cry out for mercy, the crowds, including the disciples, not only silence him, but they also avoid him. As a blind man, he was not welcome at religious festivals. There were prohibitions against people with disabilities from participating in temple events, a prohibition that had its roots in Levitical law. According to those laws, anyone with a blemish was not to participate in sacrifices. A week before Passover would begin, all attention would have been focused on Jesus. He was watched by those who loved him. He was surrounded by those who were his disciples, and he was observed by those who waited for him to make a fatal mistake. All eyes were on him, and all ears were waiting to hear what he would say next. He was surely the center of this mob procession. He was in the eye of everyone there, and soon to be the eye of the storm to come. No one saw one rather unimportant person, Bartimaeus, sitting beside the road as the crowd went by. And Bartimaeus did not see Jesus. He could not see who was passing by amid the crowd that was so close to him, ignoring him, but his ears told him that it was Jesus, and his good mind reminded him of the stories that he had heard listening to other passerbyers. As he sat along the road every day begging, "This is Jesus, the miracle worker," he thought. His hope swelled in his chest, and he called loudly, blindly, to where he thought Jesus might be. He yelled and noisily overcame the chatter of the crowd, trying desperately to reach the attention of the Master, the healer from Nazareth. He kept saying, "Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me." He yelled this over and over again, and many rebuked him, telling him to be silent. But he cried all the more, "Son of David, have mercy on me." And Jesus stood still. Everyone else wanted to ignore this nobody, walk on by, continue the journey. Everyone else wanted to gain from their own closeness to the teacher and ignore this beggar. Everyone else was blind to the needs of this noisy, worthless person, while they kept their own wants and desires in mind. Crowds in history seem to be that way, to all those who make a clamor about need and suffering. Their stock answer has always been, get out and keep still. Don't interrupt. Don't annoy. I am interested in Jesus, not someone else so unimportant. Don't push your blind self upon us. But Jesus stood still and said, call him here. What Jesus did for blind Bartimaeus, he will do for anyone in need or in suffering. He will call on him with fervor and faith. He will stop and say, come to me. It is what he does. It is what Jesus did then, and it is what Jesus will do now. He heard and saw over the heavy din of the crowd a genuine need. As the one who would be proclaimed Lord of all, as the one at the great center of the attention of the crowd, as the one who was truly great among us, at that moment, he stopped. He called this least important person to him, and he served him with care and sight and healing. And the man, leaving his beggar's mat and his coat behind, followed him. He asked Bartimaeus, what do you want me to do for you? Bartimaeus didn't hesitate. Let me see again, he said. Not solve all the problems or make bad things or bad people go away. Let me see again. Then from there, I'll follow you. From there, I'll let your will become my will as I daily search out the path that you would have me walk. Let me see again so that I can be about the business of opening eyes to who you are and what you have to offer this world that clings to its own blindness. Let me see again so that I can find you whenever I need to. How happy was Bartimaeus when the crowd said, take heart, get up, he is calling you. How quickly he threw off his cloak, sprang up, and came to Jesus. There must have been an enormous clutch of hope holding on to his heart as Jesus said to him, what do you want of me? There must have been a deep sense of want and humility as he answered, my teacher, let me see again. Go, your faith has made you well. And immediately he regained his sight and followed him on his way. Bartimaeus had known and believed there was mercy in Jesus. We have been walking with Jesus through the 10th chapter of Mark. And now we are at the end, watching Bartimaeus receive his sight. Would we be among the hushers when the beggar at the gates of Jericho start shouting that day? Would we have seen him as Jesus saw him, not as a problem to be solved or an issue to be debated, but as a man with the ability to decide and determine and choose? Let me see, Bartimaeus declares that sunny day outside the walls of Jericho. Maybe that should be our cry too, our prayer and our hope. Even for the disciples, all of the explanations that Jesus had given to them about servanthood became visible in this last hearing. Whether we are among those who are telling the outsider, the stranger, the marginalized to be quiet and not disturb the status quo, or we choose to be those who say, take heart, he is calling you. No matter who we are or who you are, there is hope for each of us. Sure, we all have blindnesses that need to be healed. Yes, we need to hear the voice of Jesus calling us and asking us what we need. We are a part of those whom Jesus has come. When you call, he will stop and hear your voice. When no one else knows your name, he will, and it will be important to him. When you need care, Jesus will be your servant and give it. When you need sight, he will open your eyes. When you travel the road to your destiny, Jesus will walk with you. He is constantly on the road to Jerusalem, as we too are constantly blind, our eyes clouded and our minds without reference, begging along the side of the road. Call out to him loudly, fervently. Let your faith in him open your eyes that you may see and follow. When we gather for worship, Jesus pays attention and asks us, "What do you want me to do for you?" When walking with Jesus, it teaches us that we aren't the only ones guiding the path. We aren't the only ones who are determining where we will go. We've surrendered that responsibility when we decided to follow Jesus. Bartimaeus knew that. We could learn from one who was blind but now sees, because he asked, "Let me see." May our answer to Jesus' question lead us into a greater connection and transformative relationships with God, with ourselves, with our neighbor, and all of creation. So let us pray this morning.